Um, and so since then, like I haven't had a crew. I have been kind of working between a lot of things, which is I find really nice. I like being able to do cool stuff without having to like put a lot of energy into centralizing like something facing inwards. So I've been doing work, two kinds of work. One is around like social innovation labs and helping the social innovation labs movement or field here in Canada start to develop a knowledge commons of like how they're creating their own knowledge and like keeping that living together. And yeah, other little bits of like research around social innovation and how it scales and that kind of thing. And then the other part is doing organizational consulting to bring, I guess, more of a like inspirally way of being, not an inspiral structure, but an inspirally way of being into more traditional like organizations. So I did a 4-month stint with a team at a university library. This is after starting this like a platform called The Future of Work as Human, which is just a banner that I decided to operate under. It's not an organization. And there were two questions that I was sitting with going into this Concordia thing is like, one is it possible to really like bring a team to life and like being fully human and awesome and everything together without changing any authority structures around them, like outside of the team? Secondly, is this way of working cool and beneficial for people that are not like me? And these people, they've been like, a lot of them had been a team of 16. Over half of them have been in that team for more than 20 years, which I've never been in anything for like more than 2 years. So I was like, okay, I got something to learn from you guys. And like uneducated, like mostly working class, like proletarian, but you know, and very traditional in their mindset of ways of working. But man, it's like over the 4 months, just spending like a few hours with them a week really turned it around. Using appreciative inquiry and human-centered design, and that team was like the worst team in the library, both in terms of their user feedback and in terms of absenteeism and even like all those like engagement factors. And now they're seen as like the future like leading team of the library. You know, it's like they're still having challenges, but the mindset has really changed and really enlivened their work. And for me, what's exciting about working in organizations is that we spend more of our time at work than pretty much anywhere in our life. And that's where we learn how to be adults, for better or for worse. And I'm curious about, okay, like if we can change how people are showing up at work in the kind of way they relate to each other and that kind of thing, does that then change what kind of citizens they are and enable them to be responsible citizens? That's like the kind of like theory of change hypothesis that I'm kind of sitting with that really excites me.
Can you zoom in a little bit of detail to describe what are the like the behaviors or the practices, like the methods that illustrate this different way of being?
Okay, I can say what I said at a conference like a few weeks ago. Like for me, one of the like exciting things that happened in Inspiral was a lot of like adult human development. And I like, my hunch is that we developed, like through being an Inspiral, we became more of the kind of citizens the world needs. And so you know, I've like we already cared about the world, but like being able to do that collectively and meeting like needs for community and belonging and like solidarity and encouragement and that kind of stuff, and being collectively intelligent, being able to work with intersubjectivity, not having to be the expert all the time. Like these are all like a lot of the skills that are pointed out at the moment as being like future work skills in the coming technological revolution. And the three things that I kind of like distilled it down to is that we do One is making space for feelings and for reflection, like making sense of what we're doing and having critical reflection, you know, things like this call. A lot of people don't have space in their work for those things. The second thing is being able to learn through trying stuff, and trying stuff to be able to learn, you know, having this experimental kind of lab approach, and using our design mindset. And the third thing is about spaces for taking initiative or having agency no matter which position of the organization you're in. Being able to like say, hey, there's like an issue that I'm seeing or something I want to do, and then being able to do it. And do it like across different parts of the organization or team, and not have to like ask for, you know, not having it to be in your job description to be able to do that. So it's kind of like three things that that we kind of put in at Concordia that have made a big difference. So it could be practices as simple as like collectively setting the meeting agenda. Yeah, a lot of people have team meetings where it's just their manager downloading on them. This is the amazing thing, is I'm getting like exposed to the regular world of work. I'm like, oh my god, this is so dead. And so what I see is like, is really about bringing life back, and like, yeah, a real sense of connection. Like I was at a conference, ran a like masterclass called Playing with Power, and I had people up and like, you know, with their two fingers kind of following each other around and practicing being a leader and a follower. You know, the thing that they found most difficult? Eye contact. And it's like, oh my god, like going through your days without like proper eye contact, like you're starving your body of oxytocin and serotonin, like of all the good stuff. And I was like, oh, there's a lot to be done here. So I get excited about that. Yeah.
I think we're excited about similar things. What I haven't heard yet is, like in my story, I'm proposing to like establish this thing which is meeting my immediate needs, and hopefully in a way that other people can have their needs met too. Are you in a similar moment? Is that part of the draw?
Yeah, it's yeah, I've also been realizing recently, like, oh man, like, I don't know, I think I've been struggling with a bit of depression, and like one of the reasons, and when I read your things, one of the reasons, it's like, oh my god, I don't have a crew, like I lost my crew. And then I was like, oh, I'm hosting this thing this weekend with like 9 awesome people that are like mostly from Montreal. And like that could be the start, that's like the start of a crew, or at least like crew dating. Hey, Lana. And it kind of like made me more excited about the retreat. And I think one of the things that stood out to me as well from what you said was about like right now that like the cells of society is like individualism or like mass populations, and that how we're missing the like the, you know, like the groups of people. And like that really made a lot of sense to me, about what the world needs the moment. And like, man, like to tackle the challenges that we're facing over the coming decades, we're going to need some like really good like people to back us up. Like that thing about needing courage and needing encouragement so that we can be courageous. Like, yeah, I'm totally on that also. Yeah, so I realized, I read your thing and I realized, oh yeah, I'm searching for a crew. And so that's something I'm going to be doing now, is like actively recruiting that. I'm not interested in like building an empire. But I'm interested in, for myself, having that and continuing to learn also like the impact that has on people. You know, I thought back to like this Japanese thing, I can't remember what it's called, but where you have like a group of like 5 people who you travel through life with, and like they're your people. And so that models like this have existed for a long time, and it feels like that's something that's like sorely needed in the world at the moment, beyond the nuclear family. And I think that you articulated that as a really like core pattern. Yeah.
Thank you. It's really funny to watch the recognizable faces from the Inspiral congregation popping in, and everyone's like, it's fun. Alana, do you want to say hello?
Hello. It's good to see all y'all. I'm just I was half listening because I was doing childcare, but then the babysitter turned up, so I thought I'd come say hi. But yeah, I'm mostly happy to just listen. I really enjoyed Rich's piece. I felt like it wasn't anything radically new. It was just like, this is a really good distillation of a lot of things that I've been sort of inarticulately thinking deep in the back of my mind for a long time. And it's really, really useful to have it articulated so clearly, and that makes it so much more transmissible. And I've already started kind of like, as I'm reading other things or encountering other things, like thinking about how it relates. And I don't know, I just find it to be I find that work, the distillation work and communication work, to be extremely valuable. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I have my own anxieties about like doing everything, like there's a crisis on and it's all hands on deck. And so like I kind of, sometimes I want to do everything, and I think there's a wiser part of myself that just wants to focus on storytelling and doing enough action so that I've got useful stories to tell, but really focused on that communication piece. And to post that, and then 3 days later to have my friend Hughie in Stockholm say, "I'm doing it. I'm underway. I'm starting a congregation, maybe 2." It's like, great. Yeah, that's really nice to get that. To be allowed to just focus, and not try to do everything.
Can I chuck in a random off the wall point, Rich, which is 3 out of 3 people who I've shared your articles with this week were all freaked out by the word congregation. I'm not saying it's negative. I think you might even enjoy that, but it's interesting.
I'm glad that they're freaked out. Yes, you know me well. I chose the word congregation because I like the well, one, I grew up in a Christian congregation that had a lot of things I don't like about it, but they did show up when there was a storm coming through that was going to destroy my parents' farm, and they held the greenhouse roof on with ropes, that I won't forget. And our congregation fluctuated up to about 200 people. I think it was constrained by Dunbar's number. And I also like that it's a noun and a verb, like it's you congregate. It's mostly an act of coming together. It's not so much an identity. And yeah, it's also, what are we going to do with the thousands of empty churches in Europe? Well, put a congregation in them. That's what. But thank you for noting that it's a trigger.
I think maybe not just for religious connotations, but also connotations of hierarchy or a central point teaching from the pulpit. Anyway.
Mix, do you want to tell us what you've been up to? Because when I checked in with you, I saw you were already doing this and already even articulating a lot of the same points 3 weeks ahead of me, but I just hadn't been looking in that direction. So is it worth giving an update?
Yeah, I'll do like a quick slice through, and it might be missing detail and people can ask if it's useful. So really quickly, I've been part of the Inspiral congregation for ages. A couple of years ago, I started being more involved building Scuttlebutt, and felt that that was where I could add the most value, because I felt like I could bring some of the good patterns from Inspiral over there. Yeah, so I started prioritizing that more than Inspiral, and at some point, like I said, I worked for Dev Academy and then left that because of some instability stuff, which is now resolved. But that was a bit stressful, and but I did come through like this formative experience with someone else from there, Pete Gerson, and we decided to start a pod emulating Mikey because we wanted to do contracting, but we wanted stability. And so we decided to share livelihoods, and we decided to do that with someone else as well. And so that's been really fantastic. That's offered like a lot of stability. it's like a very tight crew example. When I started helping out with Scuttlebutt, my main contribution, because I didn't know the programming language at the time, was just, I would call it like cheerleading. And these days I call it more like community gardening. I think about growing little plants, and like we're trying to grow a forest is a bunch of the analogy. And there's lots of things you can do. There's like cheering and watering and sheltering a little bit, and I don't know. So that's looked like a bunch of things. It's like showing interest in other people's projects, helping other people get paid work in open source, and building this open like peer-to-peer infrastructure, and helping some people from like the Bitcoin world gave money to Scuttlebutt, and just helping shape how and where that money went, and trying to like make minimal bureaucracies, which anyway, so I guess some governance stuff. And like most recently, I noticed that I was experiencing a lot of benefits from being in a pod in Protozoa, but there's quite a few like kind of lone wolf. So Scuttlebutt's interesting because there are heaps of developers, but they're kind of they're odd developers. Most of them are like developer / lawyer, like, you know, someone like Ross, or developer / mycologist, like they're growing fungus on a permaculture farm in South Africa, or developer / sailor, you know, like they've got all of these. And many of them are doing that because they've got values that are more than just computers. They're like very excited about what computers can do, but in a kind of different grounded way, which is why I quite like them. But being on that path has led a lot of them to be quite isolated, or just they're like the only person in their town doing that. And I was like, oh, it would be really easy. Like, we don't have to share livelihoods. I could just organize a regular call with 8 of them, and like I set it on the same number that Rich was suggesting, which is like enough people that you can have a conversation and still people can still be heard, and you can still empathize with everyone quite well. So have been running that for a month now as a prototype, and like with Mikey and a few others. And there are, okay, so the other thing that I wanted to talk about really briefly was responding to Rich's question about his writing. Like, so I've been organizing the first like Scuttlefest gathering thing. Hopefully people are going to be coming to Wellington from overseas, which is pretty exciting. I haven't met a lot of the people in this community. And that point about like there not being a middle ground between quite individualistic or like just hanging out with your friends and like big crowds really landed when like I realized that I was projecting a bunch of Inspiral, congregation, and crew technology into the gathering that I was starting to build, and a good friend of mine was just like, I have no idea what it is that you're building or like inviting me to. This feels weird. I have no idea what to expect, and that was quite shocking, because like I see myself quite values aligned with this person, but they had no experience of what I was trying to offer. The bits that like I wasn't sure about, or like the bits that I wanted to maybe talk about more later with you were, I think you're proposing to grow relationships really quickly. From what I read of your proposal about doing something in Europe, my experience is it takes years and years, and it's quite slow to build that soil up. And doesn't mean it can't be done faster. It's just, open question, interesting. And the other one was about money interdependence. You were interested in, I just wanted to throw one piece of something I'd learned from talking to a bunch of people about savings pools is that many of them came together with the intention of doing things together with money, but most of the value came together was about coming together and even just talking about money, and the intention to be vulnerable about this stuff was like the most transformative part. And some of them never even touched money together, but it still did amazing things. Anyway, I thought that would be could be an easy one. I'll pause there.
Totally, that's a cool story. The short note on the relationship, the speed of development of relationships, like the initial seed that the list that Nancy and I have written is basically people that we've been collecting over the last 2 years. So and we might do our first thing 6 months from now, you know what I mean? So it's sort of like, it is anticipating the slow thing. It's good to have the reminder. And yeah, money, talking about it, I think is a phase you've got to go through, you know, like at least. I'm in a savings pool, and it's been pretty good, but there have been these pockets of dysfunction because it's like this person doesn't trust the way that person handles their money, but they're not capable of having that conversation, you know. And it's like, well, that's the point. That's sort of that's why I'm in a savings pool, is to discover like what's uncomfortable about talking about money and have a nice safe space to recover from that.
Another comment towards the piece while we're kind of near the topic that I might bring. You might have seen I left it recently, Rich. I just was reminded when you were outlining kind of the tangible steps towards this experiment that might be European based. You talked about kind of bringing together a convergence of some kind, maybe of 30 folks, and kind of, at least from my reading of it, kind of focusing on, what's the purpose of this thing going to be, or kind of setting up some of that initial infrastructure for that congregation. And I was just reminded of, I was with Chelsea Robinson, Sylvia Zur, two Inspiral members in New York City, and sitting with Chelsea, and she pushed it to me. I was like a new contributor, and somebody was asking about Inspiral, and so she, as a good facilitator would, put me in the spotlight and like, oh, why don't you try and field this one? And so I answered, and the one thing that she added to my explanation was how Inspiral started out of a freelancers co-op and really out of a quite active co-productive gesture in the world of like, we are trying to make money together. And I think we were there. I think Fran was possibly there, or someone from the WeShare network. Yeah, not Fran, but another person from the WeShare network. And kind of Chelsea pointed out that like part of why she thought those diverged a bit, or like those WeShare looks very different from Inspiral's, that WeShare wasn't doing like a business to get started, but they still did have kind of a at least from my limited view, I haven't been something they crystallized around, which was, I think, their conference, this kind of action. And so yeah, I was just reflecting on some comments that I've heard chatting with Inspiral folks about that network, of like how being so inwardly focusing can be detrimental at times, or overly focusing on governance or things like that can not have the aliveness that people are looking for sometimes, or like maybe is a divergent from the intention around more people working on stuff that matters, or your very similar iteration of that I really like, supporting people to do more meaningful work. So yeah, I just wanted to toss that to you of like, maybe building an organization, in towards Mix's comment too, around long-term relationships, like oftentimes how I'm trying to get into relationship with people is by doing projects with them. And so yeah, I was just wondering if we might imagine, or you might imagine, what might be an engaging, enlivening initial project that could be kind of that seed or or something around which a congregation could crystallize?
Yeah, I hear that. In the text, I make it sound as if the first gathering is going to be this big co-design thing, but in my heart, it's just like, hey, everyone, I know what I'm doing. Do you want to follow my lead? And on the structure stuff, I'm like, this is a good purpose. This is a good enough structure. Then it's actually the question that you ended with, John, which is like, yeah, what's the projects that we want to do that are going to be magnetic? They're going to keep us, that engage us not just in our hearts, but also in our hands, like get the will going and make it like it's the easiest thing in the world to keep coming back to. That was, I think, really where the first question is. And if you look at the economics of Inspiral, I think we only make money in two ways. It's like you've got some programmers and then everyone else is basically teaching, consulting, training, hosting, facilitating on all of this interpersonal stuff and organizational design, governance, whatever that amounts to. So I think it'll be, I'm not expecting there's going to be a ton of programmers there, but I am expecting there's going to be a ton of people that can quite easily be really effective in the marketplace. Supporting people to pick up these behaviors.
Lana?
I was thinking that it strikes me that, Rich, the moment that you're describing is perhaps more similar to the pre-Inspiral proto-slime that was like whatever regen was before it was called regen, and like just the practice of some people similar to what you're talking about coming together into a deep experience. And regen itself, which was like a youth development focused thing, came out of that. Inspiral came out of that. Inspiring Stories came out of that. A lot of things came out of that. And these are the spaces that Billy was convening and still is convening. And I just think it's really interesting to think about the different phases or levels of like action oriented, like John is talking about, because I absolutely believe that the action orientation is like really key for just the simply to hold people's attention and let them make something a central focus of their life. But I'm wondering if like you see this initial step you're going to take in Europe as more at the like proto-slime level of like a regen type gathering where you're just holding openness for what needs to emerge, or is it more like the early Inspiral days of like, let's get together and do this thing? And then of course Inspiral itself evolved into its own form of a proto-slime from which many other things emerged. So maybe things go through these different levels of evolution or something, but I'm just interested in your thoughts of like, where does it start, or how do you get into that cycle?
Yeah, more thought needed, I think. The people that I have on my list, the people that I had spent time with in the last couple of years and that contributed to this, to me, like the people who have the problem that I'm trying to solve, I guess. A lot of them already have projects and they're economically precarious and emotionally precarious because they're mostly getting, like this, just even in this conversation, you have these moments of recognition and like, you can say Billy and most of us know who you mean. And like, that's a really, to me, that satisfies a deep psychological need to have that kind of familiarity and shared context. Most people that I have on my list, they're getting that from like Burning Man style festivals. And it's not enough, like it's really not enough. And those festivals are a great little momentary prototype of a different way. But if you then go back to your default world and you don't really have a space to practice, and then you go back and you have this like festival again, it's like, there it is. And like, it's really not resilient. The other ingredient that was really present in the UK is, like this, I don't know how many of you are tracking the Extinction Rebellion, but that came out of nowhere and shifted the Overton window to include the word extinction, and just like that quick. Like we are now talking about how not just that the majority of the wild animals on the planet have died in the last 40 years, but also that human extinction is like a 1 in 20 threat or something at the moment. Like that's that's insane, and it's really present in the UK, and so people are existentially disorganized. You know, like the metaphysics are in question, and I think that's a little bit points a little bit why I use the word congregation as well, because this is a metaphysical question. It's like, how do you make your meaning and purpose and stuff, and again, like a transformational festival is not enough. Like, it's not, if that's where you're getting your sustenance from, like you're going to be hungry most of the year. So yeah, I'm not sure what the productive activity is, and it's reinforcing the congregation choice. It's like, maybe we get together and worship.
I have a sort of noticing to share, which is around. Around like crews, and I guess one of the strongest things I'm hearing, the strongest needs I'm hearing that you've seen, Rich, is around people having crews, of like that gap between the individual and the crowd, and like that maybe the crews and maybe dyads as well is like where you're strongest, and that you want to have a congregation of people that can meet people to form a crew with, because a lot of people that you've been talking to, they already have kind of work that they're doing. They don't need to find the meaningful work, but they need to find the crew that can support that, and that you and Ngāti and Spiral folk have like found ways to do crews and found some patterns that people can pick up and try. And so I'm just wondering whether that clarifies anything, or whether you're already thinking that way. And I know it was already in there, but just maybe like an extra laser focus on crews and congregating for the purpose of finding your crew.
Yeah, totally. And the crew that's the real, for me, that's the real noun one. That's the real static identity thing, and it's not so much it's less dynamic and fluid, and more focused. And I think we know a little bit about how to do it, but not much, you know. Like I think there's a lot of I want to collect a lot of methodology, and it's the method of like, okay, what's some useful conversations to have? Like, there's Chloe mentioned this thing where you do an exercise about following and leading. It's like, I want to know what that is. That's perfect. Like, give me some of that. And there's 100 other of those things too. But I'm not in a it's not a mapping game. It's not like, let's collect all the resources, you know. It's like, it's actually, how do you mobilize those resources? How do you connect them to the people at the moment that they want it? And that's this weird kind of invocation.
There's also this, I've also had this thing where, because people might not have experienced what being supported and having people who are dreaming in a long-term way, in a similar way as you, because people might not have experienced that, I've like bumped into quite a few people who I like feel like I could be on a parallel journey with them, and then I hear that they're like in some sort of nasty environment, or they're just by themselves, or I'm like, what? I start wondering, like, is this person by themselves? And then I go to asking the question like, hey, what's the group? Do you have people around you who are doing this as well? What's your support like? I've struggled to be able to ask that question in a way that doesn't sort of sound weird, maybe.
People also don't even have any idea what you're asking. They're just like, well, I have some friends.
Yeah. And so there's that. And then there's also like, the like awkward follow-up, which is like, there's some nice people who are quite supportive.
Have you heard the good news?
Introduce you to, yeah. And so I think one of the things about the congregation is as distinct from crews, which are very tight and have quite hard boundaries, as in like, you're not in my crew, Rich, like you're in my congregation, but we're not in a crew together right now. But we're in so the congregation has like fuzzy boundaries, and it's an opportunity for people to feel the vibe and experience the vibe, because I haven't been able to tell anyone about the vibe. And so something like this little fairy ring support crew group thing that I just started in Scuttlebutt is is about that. It's like, hey, do you want to get together and we can just support each other professionally? And then they're also getting a dose of the vibe. And some people will be more interested in more of that. Anyway, that's all.
I want to come back. Thanks, Max. I want to also come back to what you said before, Rich, about the Overton window and like this micro-solidarity word for me. It's like, oh, wow, what if that could be a sort of like create an Overton window for all these people who are like needing a crew, but not knowing how to speak about it, to be like, oh, point them at micro-solidarity, and that's got a whole lot of resources and examples and case studies of people that are doing this kind of micro-solidarity crew thing. And then they're like, oh, I'll just start a micro-solidarity crew. And if I want to know more about the vibe, then I'll come to the congregation as well.
Yeah, I think Nick, kind of along the same line, this is, I think, one of the things that called out to me but wasn't necessarily answered by the piece, Rick, was this, I think, you know, learning the sort of terminology that like you sort of used in that piece, and came to realize that like there's a number of different congregations that like I sort of like zoom through as like a comet kind of zooms through the solar system, without ever feeling like I've actually glommed onto a crew. And so I would love to get some more like thoughts on the ground about like how you actually, like how does, how is Babby formed? Like how is crew formed? You know, like what is it that actually crystallizes that for a group of 6 to 8 people, in a way that actually leads to meaningful work? Because like I feel like I have a to-do list like as long as my arm of like things I'd love to do, but like it's really hard obviously to go out there alone and be like, I'm gonna hack on this code for a while and just hope people show up, because it doesn't work that way.
I've got an answer. I'd love to hear some other answers too. And we're at the top of the hour, so I just wanted to check on people's time. I'm happy, I'm available, I'm enjoying this conversation, and I'm available to stick around for a good chunk of time. I just want to see if anyone needs to drop out.
I'm going to have to drop out, I'm afraid. I'm getting a lot out of it, but I've only slotted in the hour.
Well,
I also need to go. It's getting a bit late, and I've got a retreat. I need to start running tomorrow, so I need to be fresh for that. But I'll look forward to watching the rest of the recording.
Ditto.
Yeah, super enjoyed this conversation, and yeah, what we're exploring together feels super rich. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. I will. I'll probably stick around for a bit longer, but yeah, it's getting kind of late here, so I will probably collapse soon.
Thanks. Cheers, y'all. Good to see you.
Every conversation with you is super rich.
and punctual. Craig, do you have last words before you drop off the call? Maybe you want to talk about that. How was crew formed?
Yeah, well, I guess my theory is that I don't know if we have any evidence that anything works better than random assignment. I don't think forming a crew is the important bit. I'm sure everyone's had a crew-like feeling out of home groups at a Summerfest, for example, which is one of the things we do at Spiral Summer Retreats in the last couple of years is assign a crew. I realize those random assignments were facilitated by Susan, but nonetheless, I think perhaps random assignment with exactly the right balance of availability and diversity works pretty well. Like, when Mick's advertised his fairy ring on Scalabot, I'd be interested to know whether you deliberately sought people out or whether you just kind of created the event and then saw who turned up.
I handpicked.
Yeah, cool.
I have a comment on the random assignment thing. That's basically my experience with root systems, is that our random assignment thing didn't work. And we kept going for 3 years based on our random assignment, but that is what if there was one learning, that was the fundamental problem that I don't want to repeat again. And what I'd rather try is the idea of, with these micro-solidarity groups, like you're creating a portal or using like how Mix describes it, it's a portal, or you're creating an invitation. So I'm much more interested in really trying to get to what the core of your micro-solidarity group is about, drafting up, or like what's the party about, what's the theme of the party, draft up the invitation to the party and be really clear about, I think what I learned is that the invitation should be about the shit. It shouldn't be about how great the party is and how you're going to do all these fun things together. It should be about how you're going to struggle together, and you're going to have other people to struggle with, or you're going to have people who care about the things that you care about struggling on, and then see who turns up for that party. Because at least I think what happened with our group is that we had this mismatch of, one way to describe it, like the people who are the co-owners and the people who just wanted to be employees. So the people who were willing to pitch in for the struggle and people who wanted the benefits. And yeah, potentially random assignment with the right people would totally work. But at least when you sell people on the benefits, there is like an entitlement thing. And we all know that the good juicy bits come from hard work and struggle. So at least for myself, yeah, when I make my next Microsolidarity group, it will be selling people on the struggle and trying to find who's interested in the stuff that I'm interested in and working towards that. So that's me.
I think, Craig, you were maybe technically accurate when you say we don't know of anything better than random assignment, right? Like we haven't proven another method that does better than that.
Yeah, and plus we're assuming a bunch of technologies here that we know pretty well in terms of like the hardness, the boundary, you know, like you need to make it hard enough to get into the crew, you're soft into the congregation, all those sorts of the trust building that we all work on and all those sorts of things. So yeah, no, the interesting lessons there from Roots as well. So I'm taking that on board. So yeah, I'm going to answer.
We've maybe learned a couple things about practices that help the right people stay, maybe something like I always really appreciated that like gentle current idea of like you have to kind of keep swimming against it to stay involved. I think that's worked really well in a couple of contexts that I've seen. And also like I'm constantly thinking about the relationship of structure of the thing to the character of relationships or commitments or whatever that evolves. And Mikey, I'm interested in if the structure of root systems had been different or something like that. Like I just wish we went through so many iterations of learning about this in Lumio and tried many different approaches. And to me, I did come out feeling like, the structure and content of like the agreements and what's explicit and what's not explicit and all this stuff does have a really big impact on are people committing to each other in the way that's working for each other, and is there a place here for people who just want to be employees, and all these conversations, and are these questions being asked and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, interesting questions there.
It's never going to be a good time to duck out, so I might just sneak off now because otherwise I'm going to keep getting excited by everyone's things. So love you all. Bye bye.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, Maddie.
I quite enjoy. I think that would be talking to people who have a bunch of experience in crews, but also having that conversation in a context where people might not have had crews, I think is really important, because I think there are some, like if Rich and I have a conversation, there are some things we just won't see because we take them as given, and that's actually really painful when it comes to like trying to build a congregation or a new crew, because you invite people in and then you're like, what are you doing? What is that? And you're like, oh damn, I realized that there's this protocol that I'm running that I forgot to tell anyone about or include in the invitation. Why have we got that? Oh yeah, we just do it because it makes everything easier, and we didn't do it for a while and it was a shit show. But yeah, like I've lost track of a bunch of what some of those are.
And it takes so much patience and empathy to stay with that work with people who are not, I'm not talking about it as some sort of linear thing where someone's ahead and someone's behind, but just everybody's showing up with their different experiences and assumptions and emotional problems, and like you have way You have way more empathy and patience than I do. I think Rich probably has way more patience with this than I. Like I personally have, I'm not going to do this work. I'm going to work with people who already get it, who've already been through the ringer, and I'll be out the other side over here, like working in a crew with those people. But I'm so grateful that there are other people who do have that kind of patience. So yeah, I'll be cheering y'all on.
One of the pieces that's kind of related to that and related to Ross's original question that I want to bring in is that like a piece that I think Craig was taking for granted when he said random assignment, and that we've had a really ambivalent relationship towards within Inspiral is about, you know, this thing in the domain, the corner marked leadership, eldership, who are you following kind of thing. And so like there has been this lurking question around the story, which is like, oh, if I want to start something like this, where do I start? And when someone asked me that yesterday on an interview, I said, this was someone in the US. So from my 3 months in the US, I was like, wow, okay, you're really missing a whole bunch of the parts that I take for granted back home. So it's harder for me to know what to recommend. But my answer was, find someone whose feet you want to sit at, you know, like that find a relationship that you want to emulate and ask them if they'll teach you how to do it. Like, I wouldn't start from scratch. I wouldn't be a solo adventurer and then go like, oh, I've read the story and I want to start practicing based on what I've read on that story. Like, I think the vibe is passed hand to hand and face to face, and we've benefited from such an extraordinary chain of elders passing it to us, and we learn by mimicry. You know, we don't learn by reading. We learn a little bit by reading, but we mostly learn from mimicry, and the reading can help like crystallize some of the ideas. So that was part of the reason I think I didn't make the proposal look super attractive for other people to go and start as well. Was like, I don't think you're likely to have a great experience if you just do it from the book.
How are you? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Rich, how are you resolving, like, it sounds to me like you're setting, I mean, you obviously have a lot of leadership skills and experience in this area, and you are convening something with these people, and you will obviously be seen in like a leadership role. And I have struggled with ambivalence or conflict around that internally, and I know you have as well. And I'm just wondering, like, what's your approach going to be to that question going into this?
My vulnerable answer, I was 3 wines in the other day and having a conversation with someone who I didn't know very well and didn't think that I was going to see them again. So I was honest. And I said, you know, fuck it. I'm looking for people who are willing to follow my leadership.
Yeah.
And I've never said that before in my life. And it's true. It's like, I am the beneficiary of such extraordinary wisdom and knowledge and method and experience and all this stuff. Like, people have given it to me, and most of them gave it to me because they want me to do something with it, and I'm going to do it, you know. And people are calling for it. Like, everywhere I turn, people are calling for it. I've got 6 or 7 invitations for different podcasts, you know. Like, there's a reason. And the answer that has given me certainty, you know, like, how do I square that circle if I mostly associate myself with anarchist values? Like, what the fuck am I doing talking about leadership? It just comes down to coercion and free choice, and a proactive kind of transparency about these are the risks and pitfalls of looking to someone else for the answers. And this is the reality distortion field that I carry around me. And I go to great lengths to try and document exactly how the mechanism of that, so that people are inoculated against it, knowing that I'm still gonna seduce a whole bunch of people and be regularly tempted to abuse the power that I gain, you know, like, and there is no solution to that. There's only a constant struggle and a constant invitation to accountability, and people like all of you calling me out and being like, what was that about, man? That looked out of line. And I'm getting better at doing that myself. But I'm also going to keep I propose to keep increasing my power. You know, like that's pretty much the game that I'm in here. I got a friend request the other day from a billionaire philanthropist, him coming to me. It's like, well, good. You know, we need to be moving billions right now, and I actually know where to put some of that money. So like, come to me, and so long as that I'm held in the web of accountability and I keep operating in transparency, then I'm like, yeah, it feels okay. It's uncomfortable and dangerous, but it feels okay.
Man, I'd encourage you to just own it. Like, own the fuck out of it, man. Like,
Yeah.
The thing I see all the time, and I'm so fucking bored of, is the inverse of like somebody being like, oh, no, there's no bosses here. I'm not holding any power. Of course they fucking are. And that's just such a boring story. I'd love to see the inverse where like, yeah, I'm holding the power, but the reality is that you're constantly growing leadership around you and distributing that power. Like, yeah, that would be awesome.
All right, this is fascinating, and like Greg, if I don't leave, I'll just stay all night. So, but I do have to get up tomorrow. But thank you very much for the invite, and it was great to see all you guys again and meet all of you for the first time, some of you, and I will definitely stay in touch. Bye.
Thanks for joining, Ross. Good to see you.
You're Ross.
Nice to meet you, Ross. Yeah.
It's so nice having this mute unmute thing. It's like a signal that's binary, whereas usually in a conversation you've got this very fuzzy, like, oh, are they going to speak or not? I have an invitation, which is have a moment of silence to check in with if there are questions that are alive that you want to ask. Otherwise, we can put this conversation down for a rest.
I don't want to cut people's minutes off. Do you want more time? Okay. Yeah, I've got a question. Can I be your advisor? What I mean is, you're doing this thing. Maybe I don't mean advisor, maybe I do, peer. So if you're doing community gardening over there, I kind of want to see what you're doing and like poke around in it, partly because I'm curious and partly because I think I've got experiences which would, similar to yours and different to yours, which we could both learn from if we discuss what you're doing. And it would also like add value to what I feel like I'm doing. Yeah.
A slightly big answer. I was really intentional positioning that this new congregation is going to be alongside Inspiral, not part of Inspiral. But I think what I'm trying to do there is to cast an invocation of the assembly of congregations of which Inspiral is a member, and that this new thing is going to be a member, and the Scuttlebutt community is already a member, and the Mindfulness for Change community is already a member as well of this assembly of congregations. And if you're a member of the assembly, then I think you have some kind of citizenship rights in all of the congregations. There's a little bit of that going on. So that means like I'm intending to set up some kind of base, some physical base, and a cultural and technical, you know, all that other more abstract base as well. And you, Mix, as a member of other related congregations, are like immediately welcome, and it's actually like it's designed to host you. You know, like that's a big part of what I want to be constructing, is that the four of you on this call are like, oh, that's exactly where I want to go and spend some time. You know, like that's kind of the design criteria. And the specific request, I think maybe Nick, you can illustrate with some of the stuff you were talking about yesterday as well. It sounded like you were offering to be a companion, you know, like that we're walking along in parallel, and sometimes looking forwards and sometimes looking across and seeing each other. And heck yes, I'm up for that.
Cool.
Yeah, I think I have a similar request to Nick's, not in like a meet every week way and check in, but like just to with that like explicit agenda of like wanting to put that little DNA of the inner dimensions into this microsolidarity thing. I've also just like during this call really crystallized around like, oh, this is about crews and congregation that's designed to help people find crews and like feel the vibe of what a crew is. At least that's my story of it. And I think I'm wanting to play in a similar game of like peer-to-peer mental health as well, which I think is in a similar space. It's just a different framing, and sort of yeah, it seems to be a real need in the world for that, like the dyad and the crews. Yeah. So yeah, keen to companion you and be companioned.
Yeah, me too.
Nice. In that case, I have a request, which is when the moment's right. This is not an urgent one. This is just have it in the back of your mind somewhere. But if I'm right, sensing that storytelling is my best work, help me get paid for that. And the easiest thing is like people can buy my book and they can support my Patreon. But there's probably other things too. But that's just like a kind of a on the slow burn. I would also be interested to hear what other needs people have in the room, if we want to name those into the square circle.
I'd like to get paid for storytelling as well, and I'd like to find a way for more people telling these kinds of stories to get paid for that.
I mean, I haven't caught up with you, Rich, in a while, but there's a whole story around what I want to spend my next section of life doing. So I'm keen for, or I'll unravel that slowly. I'm in no rush, but yeah, it's about the living infrastructure, the physical infrastructure side of things. So yeah, generally just I'm keen with all of these things, and organizational systems I've also learned is like something that I'm quite good at and interested in. Like for example, Camp Desmond, it's now like, yeah, oh, I guess I said this in my check-in. It's like 40 or 50 people. Like that, the worship, the congregation is growing. And yeah, wanting to get good at supporting large-scale community congregations. I've been blessed with all the other Inspiralites who have organized previous events I've gone to, and I'm like, oh yeah, now I know why that's cool. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm just keen to basically be well connected as things go on, because I'm planning on doing my own, similar to a mix with like Scuttlebutt stuff, but also potentially other things. And there's like Art Hack community and Camp Desmond community, the Wellington Burner community, all these things that I think are like I'm very well connected to, or have a lot of gravity in. And like, if there is mass movements, that's what we need. And so I wanted to pitch my body into the mix.
I support and celebrate those notions, and also just to say I'm going to be here in Paikakariki till early March, so I've got a place for you to sleep, and there's a good beach for walking and talking on, so do come and visit sometime, and let's do the yarn.
Yeah, I've run out of excuses by now, so.
I think I'm doing great, and I don't feel like I need that much, like in terms of like I'm making good money, working on lots of like really awesome projects in a really sustainable way for my like life and balancing childcare and all this stuff. And I'm, you know, very, very lucky. And like it, all of that comes from, I guess, the way that I previously have invested in relationships in the congregation and the way that congregation invested in me. But as of now, I guess since leaving Inspiral, I just am holding this question of to be completely frank, I feel like I have quite a bit to offer a congregation, and I'm wondering what's in it for me. So if people have like thoughts of like how I might think about this, or what is the way I could be challenging myself coming out the other side of a really amazing congregation experience, and feeling quite full and satisfied, like, is it cool to just chill, or like should I be thinking of like, oh, how am I not growing because I'm not like super active in a congregation right now, or something like that. So yeah, if you have thoughts about that, I think I've been convinced to come to the Inspiral summer retreat, so I guess I'll have a good chance to talk to people about it then.
What immediately jumps to me is it's good to have some reserves on the bench, you know, like assuming we're in for some major instability in the next decade. Like if I spend the next 3 years going hard nuts on this, I'm going to be exhausted again. So if you're fresh and ready to step up, like I think that's good too. I've been saying that as well with a lot of my friends who are like activists in the US, and they're like feeling super guilty about having to stop and say, no, it's good. Like you go out and rest somewhere, and then when the other friends burn out, like you go in. I mean, let's try not to burn out, but still, it's good to be fresh.
I'm kind of interested in, I think if you do build or start building the UN thing, I'd be keen on that. Like, I think the very minimum would be like, I've got an assumption that in-person congregations, or congregations that are at least in like similar time zones, are much more powerful. And so knowing where the congregations are and what their vibe or focus is would be a big help for, and like having contacts in them would be a big help for like routing humans towards the vibe. Yep. So like, I don't know whether your congregation in Europe would have a center as a concrete example, and but I do know you, which means that it's easy for me to like bounce off of you. Yeah, but I don't know much about Nick's congregation, and I don't know how to contact Nick. I guess I could go via Rich. Yeah, but I also don't know what sort of people. I know a little bit about the congregation that Mikey wants to form, but yeah, but I don't think the rest of you know what sort of people would enrich his congregation. So yeah, maps. I'm all about maps, and they don't need to be like accurate, but just super accurate. But just I don't know what format it takes, but
I hope we're on the cusp of like new and exciting learning about how to do this. Like we used to call it network to network collaboration, or you could call it congregation to congregation UN development, or whatever it is. But like that's an area where I feel like I've tried to do work and then kind of fallen on my face and like never quite figured out what actually works. Like we've done like monthly meetings of like cross network ambassadors and like cross pollinating and secondment. Like we seconded Fran from Europe to New Zealand, and like you know, so they've done stuff that was cool. But I don't feel like I'm like, yes, I know how to do this.
I have something off in that, or just at least a thought of like this idea of the Overton window and having like just really succinct little bits of gene code that you can put in to another network of like, because all these congregations have things that they do really well. Like Inspiral has things that it does really well. I think I've experienced a different set of things that we do well in Mindfulness for Change. I think Scuttlebutt probably has similar things, and like all of these networks will have different things. And it's like, if we can we can live in our world and like swim in that soup that like fits us the best. But if we can find ways to condense that big soup into like small things that people can take and like explore for themselves, then I think that's like a really good way of doing it, rather than sharing like a whole big story, just like very succinct, like less is better, less is more.
I have the smallest, I was already thinking this before you said that, but the smallest possible thing, which is a hashtag. So I propose the Microsolidarity hashtag, and if it's useful to you, then you use it, you know. And I think hashtags are the ideal taxonomy for doing this kind of mapping, because they only work when people find them valuable in a way, whereas like you can make a map and spend your life making a really great map that no one cares about.
Yeah, I'd really love to see Microsolidarity become a hashtag that like means this like practice of doing crews or something like that, with the vibe that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And
so I checked before I posted it to see what I could find on the web around that hashtag. Someone had their microwave had exploded, and there was some comment on Twitter about like Microsolidarity. But it was pretty much empty. It was pretty much up for grabs, and so it was a strategic choice. And if it's a good word, then you know we actually need a bunch of us to be propagating content on it to set the definition.
Yeah, I'd love to use it. I think it would be helpful in mindfulness for change, of like pointing people to this hashtag and being like, you know, we could set up crews along these lines. It would really help. Said enough.
We're at 89 minutes on the conversation, so that seems like a natural place to have a quick checkout round. I'm so delighted to have a conversation with you lot. I mean, everyone was good, but the smaller the conversation, the more satisfying for me. It's a real theme. Yeah, it makes me warm in my tummy and relaxed and feel good and like, yeah, everything's going to be fine. We're all doing our parts. And I mean it, everyone, come visit me. It's nice out here. It's 5 degrees warmer than Wellington too. I'm going to pass to you, Mikey, to check out.